Good evening, everyone. Tonight is the night we're having a city council meeting. It is Monday, March 20th, 2017. We'll start with a roll call and determination of quorum.
Nordstrom, Drew, Solomon, Doyle, Estes, Scott, Laurenti, Wright, Modrick, Roberts. We have a quorum.
Okay, thank you. Now we'll have the invocation by Bob Jacobs, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance.
Thank you. I invite you to pray with me. Almighty God, you care about our daily lives and the way we carry out our business and our leisure. You've given us freedom and with it responsibility. Bless those tonight who hold office in the government of this city, that they may do their work in a spirit of wisdom, honesty, respect, and justice. Help them use their authority to serve faithfully, to promote the general welfare, and to seek the good of this city. I pray this in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, everyone. And now the next item is to adopt the agenda. Okay, we have a motion. Was that Jerry Wright? Yes. And a second by Steve Laurenti. All in favor of adoption of the agenda, say aye. Aye. Opposed, say no. Motion carries. Now I'm going to go down front for a couple minutes for some awards and recognitions. First off, we have a presentation by the National Weather Service, Susan Sanders.
Well, good evening, and thank you. I want to recognize the City of Rapid City, and specifically Daryl, for becoming a Weather Ready Nation ambassador for the National Weather Service. And this is a program where local jurisdictions and other organizations help promote preparedness against hazardous weather events that obviously we're all facing. And I think it also recognizes Rapid City's efforts as a leader in this for 45 years since the recovery of the flood. It's been a leader in preparing people for natural hazards and also protecting people by its recovery.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for coming.
Now for our Veteran of the Month, I'd like to have Christian Messina come up front. In partnership with the Veterans Coordination Commission, we're pleased to present the March 2017 Veteran of the Month recognition to Christian Messina. Staff Sergeant Messina enlisted in the United States Air Force on December 13, 2011. He chose to enlist due to the ongoing war on terror and wanted to make a contribution in changing the world for the better. His 6-year enlistment will end this December, but he foresees being a career airman. Staff Sergeant Messina has supported B-1 missions for 2 years and is scheduled to deploy to Guam later this year. He has served as a member of the Air Force Honor Guard, supporting the mission in the Air Force District of Washington, successfully completing 358 funerals at Arlington National Cemetery. For full honor funerals. He performed rifle manuals, and for the majority of the funerals, he presented the colors. He represented the Air Force in the 2012 Macy's Day Parade. He served on escort flight for the transition ceremony of the 17th Chief of Staff of the Air Force and was selected for the presidential escort flight for the 57th presidential inauguration honoring the Commander-in-Chief Barack Obama. He was hand-selected to be a Pentagon tour guide where he gave tours to military officials, heads of state, and foreign dignitaries. He was assigned to Ellsworth Air Force Base in 2015 as a hydraulic systems technician for the B-1 bomber. Although Staff Sergeant Messina has only been part of the community since 2015, he has worked hard to support local organizations who serve those in need. He has worked with Love Inc., packing, storing, and organize over 14,000 pounds of food that he participated in the United Way Day of Caring. He is currently honoring local veterans and active duty members by serving in the Ellsworth Air Force Base Honor Guard, which includes performing as a member of the firing party, carrying caskets, folding the American flag, handing it to next of kin, and playing taps. Staff Sergeant Messina has been married for 4 years to Amy Rose, who has been providing loyal support to him since before his enlistment. Staff Sergeant Messina has been serving our country since 2011 with dedication and sacrifice, making him an excellent Veteran of the Month. His example of service makes him deserving of this honor, and we'd like to extend our gratitude. Thank you, Christian Messina. Each keep it down to 15 minutes. Would you like to say a few words? No, thanks. Okay, so also we have our little City of Rapid City coffee mug for you. Service.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Now I'd like to call Dale Tech up front.
Good evening, everyone. Tonight, I'd like to honor Roy Cork of the Public Works Department for 20 years of service. Roy started his career with the City of Rapid City 20 years ago as an engineering technician in the Public Works Department. His primary duties were the inspection of public works improvements and any infrastructure that was either under contract by the city or by private development. A couple years later, Roy was promoted to senior engineering technician and worked in that capacity until 2007 when he was again promoted to engineering project administrator and was put in charge of our GIS database, which we've got every pipe, every hydrant, every sewer manhole in a GIS system, and Roy's responsible for that and has done a fantastic job keeping that updated and operational for us. In addition, we also have a water and sewer model that Roy's responsible for, making sure that that operates properly. And any of you that have also been to any other council meeting in the past have probably seen Roy. He's also worked in the booth back here, helping running these meetings for about the last decade as well. So with that, I'd like to thank Roy for his 20 years of service, and I hope he gets 20 more.
Now is a time for general public comment, a time for members of the public to discuss or express concerns to the council on any issue not on the agenda. Action will not be taken at the meeting on any issue not on the agenda, except by placement on the agenda by unanimous vote of the council members present. And if I have this correct, of the dozen or so speaker request forms that everyone in the audience filled out, I think only one of them is in the general public comment, unless it's tied to an agenda item, and that's by Jared Grosshans.
Excuse me, I'd like to thank you for being here with me. There's my mother. These are my tenants. I got charged for snow removal after 25 years of owning the same property and never having been charged. And I'm really, really wondering why it happened. I've got photos. There's no snow. I just don't understand why this is happening to me. And $500 for snow removal on one little corner of lot in downtown Rapid City is really overwhelming, don't you think? Anybody want to spend $500 on snow removal? I've got photos. I got photos that were sent to me by the city. It's just not fair. And you know what? Having been a landlord for a long time, my mother said, Jared, keep it short. I've never been charged like this before. And I don't understand. I got white picket fences. I got green lawns, I got apple trees, I got everything in the world. Nice downtown properties. But I got charged. And that's all I have to say. Oh, here I have these.
No.
If anybody would like to see them. Yeah. Pictures? Would you like to see them? Before and after. There's no difference. And those were sent to me from the city.
No, it's not on the agenda. Mr. Grosshans, we'll review these photos, and I'll double check with code enforcement. And if we have your contact information,
Thanks,
then
yeah, I appreciate it. And
get
you
hold
know,
of
they
you.
also told me that I couldn't do anything until tonight, which put $100 on each single property. So now I'm at $475, $375, just because I had to wait for tonight. You know, and it's not your fault. It's not your fault, but there's something wrong with this picture, right?
Okay, we'll review it and follow up with you.
Okay.
You need,
My tenant, Barry Gibson, my other tenant, Chris, out there with the snow shovel. I've got pictures of my snow shovels. I take care of my places. I'm not a slumlord at all.
what's the address of this property?
402 Columbus and also 817 4th Street. 817 4th Street.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, thanks for listening to me. I appreciate all of you.
Okay. Jerry Wright?
Just going to ask if we could have this back to our next council meeting, please. Thank you.
I'm Raleigh's son. I'm sorry, I'm Raleigh's son.
Okay. No. I'll follow
Gotta
up.
go now. Bye-bye.
Okay. Okay, we're going to go on to non-public hearing items, items 4 through 62, and we'll open public comment on items 4 through 44. And we have a few speaker requests. We have one speaker request in this batch, and we'll go to Eric Monroe.
Thank you. My name is Eric Monroe. I'm the chairman of the Historic Preservation Commission, and just wanted to provide an update. We're item number 37, and with our grant application, just wanted to have a chance to speak to you on what we intend to do with that over the course of the next year. What we're looking at is updating the downtown historic walking tour, updating architectural drawings of some of the buildings that had been done previously, including new buildings that were not part of the original walking tour. We're also continuing to advocate for the facade improvement program. We're investigating some online media education and outreach, and we also have commission and staff training. Over the past year, projects that we have currently in work is we are wrapping up the architectural resurvey of the east of Fifth Street district. The draft findings have potentially identified 12 new historic resources in that part of the community. Again, that's still being worked on, and it's being reviewed currently with SHPO. Coming up on April 29th, and it's actually May is Historic Preservation Month, so we're on the front side of that. We are going to host a window restoration workshop, potentially at Wilson School, as an education for residents of the West Boulevard district within their own houses there. So just a few of the things we have and we've been working on, and provide an update. Thank you.
Thank you. And we'll close public comment on those items, and we'll move on to consent items, items 4 through 44. So we'll go to Jerry Wright.
Item 39, please. Thank you.
Joel Landine.
Could you pull up item number 38?
Darla Drew.
Item 33, please.
Dale Tech.
Item 42, please.
Okay, are there any other items that need to be pulled from consent? If not, I would entertain a motion to approve the consent items with the exception of 33, 38, 39, and 42.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Doyle, seconded by Laurenti. All in favor of that, say aye. Aye. Opposed, say no. Motion carries. And we will go to item number 33, which is to approve resolution number 2017-025, a resolution writing off uncollectible account receivables, accounts for parking violations. We'll go to Darla Drew.
Thank you, Mayor. I just have a couple of comments and then some questions for Tracy. It just seems that I've had some people express some concern about whether or not we'd be enforcing tickets. Why would we forgive so many tickets? The amount is around $67,000. And I wanted Tracy to have a minute to explain some of the things that are going on with these uncollectible fines. So Tracy, if you could please explain why we have so many, when they come from, I mean, how many years does this span, and what are we going to do to make sure it doesn't happen again?
All of these violations are from 2013. For our annual report, our auditors allow us to have 3 years outstanding. So we are to write off anything prior to that, as it is deemed uncollectible. With our new software that we just went live on January 30th, we will have the ability to send out notices, which will be a nice feature that hopefully we can collect some more of those fines.
And I had an additional question for you. I understand that if you buy a used vehicle and they have fines, there's no way you know about those, so those just kind of go uncollected and add to the uncollectible fines, correct?
That's correct.
So, just so people out there know, if you buy a used car, it could have, parking fines on it that you don't know about. Thank you.
Okay, could use a motion on item 33.
Move to approve.
Okay, motion to approve by Scott. Second by Laurenti. All in favor of approval, say aye. Aye. Opposed, say no. Motion carries. Now we'll go to item 38, to approve the purchase of a stage with vision funds for use by Rapid City Summer Nights, and authorize Mayor and Finance Officer to sign lease agreement with Rapid City Summer Nights for the use of the stage. We'll go to Joel Landine.
Thank you, Mayor. I believe was handed out with your agendas was an updated lease agreement, and the only change from the agreement we reviewed at Legal and Finance last week is that the term of the lease is now 10 years. And per the discussion at Legal and Finance, that is equivalent to the amount of time that we would amortize the stage if we had owned it traditionally and would technically have no more value. So we felt that was a good amount of time in order to protect the community's investment in that stage.
Darla Drew.
Thank you. I have a couple questions for Joel, please.
Okay.
So Joel, we'll have this for 10 years, and we are the lessor in this agreement, but Summer Nights is the lessee. If anyone else approaches us about the use of that stage, are they able to do that, or is this just for the exclusive use of Summer Nights?
No, they would need to approach Summer Nights. We will not have any rights to lease the stage to anyone else. Basically, for the 10-year term, Summer Nights has exclusive use of that stage. However, it is contemplated that Summer Nights would then lease out that stage as well to community groups that need it.
That would be terrific, because I know it's a need. And after the 10 years, it goes to Summer Nights, correct? The stage is owned in entirety by Summer Nights?
That will be up to them, but yes, they have an option to purchase it for a minimal amount at the end of the 10 years.
If they should cease to operate before that time, they relinquish the stage to the city?
Right. We own it, so we would just retake possession of it. That's why we structured it this way, because now we will be on the title. So if they cease operations, I mean, it's our stage. They can't do anything with the stage without us agreeing to it, since our name will be on the title and we'll be the one licensing and registering it.
Okay, that's the entirety of my questions. Thank you.
Okay, we have a motion to approve by Laurenti and seconded by Doyle. All in favor of approval say aye. Aye. Opposed say no. Motion carries. That'll take us to item number 39, which is to acknowledge a briefing on street pavement maintenance. We'll go to Jerry Wright.
Thank you, Mayor. I asked to have this pulled off the consent calendar primarily so that the entire council could receive the briefing that we received from Dale on Tuesday, which is brief, and if we maybe can discuss some of the issues, and if that, I'll ask Dale to present. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. At Alderman Wright's request, Public Works staff put together some estimates of what it would cost to maintain, replace our infrastructure, looking at it on a design life scale. So the report that's linked to the agenda, hopefully you all had a chance to review that, but over the next 50, 60 years, we're going to have many infrastructure needs, not only our street infrastructure, but bridges, alleys, even our water and sewer infrastructure. So taking a look at fairly aggressive yet reasonable replacement schedule, maintenance schedule, we put numbers to all those. The summary page at the very end identifies our current funding is about $13 million a year for our street type infrastructure. And our needs over time pencil out to be about $38 million. So there's roughly a $25 million difference in that. I think Alderman Wright would like to talk to the council or have the discussion at the council level as to what the expectation is for our infrastructure and what the funding should be. So with that, I'll stand by for any questions that you may have on the estimates that were put together.
Okay, Jerry, you still have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor. I know in my campaign as an elected official for the city and prior, and many of us have heard complaints of our constituents and citizens about the condition of our streets, and we've all talked about we need to fix them. And I did ask Dale, his staff, and our acting director to put together an estimate of what that would entail and what the cost would be to the taxpayers and what we'd have to do. And in reality, I just want to get this out for discussion, honest discussion. We have a huge investment. We have, I think, 450 miles of streets, which is probably worth $500 million. And we have other infrastructure, of course, but that's a lot of money we have invested. And I think we also have a responsibility to be good stewards of the taxpayers' money, but we also have a huge responsibility to be good stewards the taxpayers' infrastructure and their community. I think we have not done a good job for years, decades, of funding adequately the maintenance of our streets, and that's why we're in the condition we are. And we have some huge investments that were made in the last 25 years in 4 and 5 lane highways, concrete, they're very expensive, that have a life probably of 50 years. Well, most of them are 25 years or more old. And someday in the future, we're going to be facing some significant repairs or replacement. We need to get ready for it. We also have residential streets that are failing, that need care and address, and we really don't have an adequate funding mechanism in place. This is not a tax and spend approach by my part. I want us to talk about the elephant in the room. I think that campaigning for elected office, it's very difficult for a candidate to say, I'm going to raise your taxes, because they won't get elected. And it's very difficult for us to do anything without extra money. That's what it's about. I think that a lot of times people say, we'll take the money out of the other budgets. We have a $150 million budget for the city. That's police, fire, parks, snow removal, everything. And there is not $25 million afloat in there. I know that. There is possibly, if we only had $1 million shortfall or a few $100,000, it'd be a piece of cake. It's not. It's a significant funding every year. That's the estimate. So we need to actually discuss how can we do it. I think we need to ask our constituents, our community, what do you expect in your infrastructure? What are you willing to pay? And I think the question should also be, what can we afford? I think we can do better than we are. I think we can do better than we have done. But it's going to take some discussion and commitment by all of us that are elected and the community as a whole. And I think it's not an easy task because it's money. And there's not an unlimited amount of it. I know that. But the failure in not taking care of it will create even more of an issue and a more of a catastrophic cost to the future citizens of Rapid City. So I do ask at this time that the council, if they have questions this time, great, or discussion, great. But as we go into the budgeting process and as we develop policies in the future, then let's talk about this honestly. And let's say we're talking about what we own, and we're talking about what we need to spend to take care of it and replace it. It's business. It's being responsible to the taxpayers. With that, I'll cease to discuss and open up for questions, and hopefully we can move on. Thank you.
Okay, any further comments? Lisa? Okay, we have a motion to acknowledge and a second by John Roberts, and we'll go to Lisa Modrick.
Thank you, Mayor. I want to thank Dale and his staff that put this report together because it's the defined numbers I think we've all been looking for quite some time. I know other council members have probably not had it quite as well defined to see the actual breakdown, and it really becomes real. We can touch these numbers. And so I really appreciate the work of Dale Tech and the staff, and I appreciate Councilman Jerry Wright also for bringing this into such an easy form because it's easy for the public to understand where the breakdowns are and also define what the numbers are. So when you're looking at a $25.5 million difference, that number needs to be found if we want to continue to not just fix our roads, but also grow our roads. We're developing all the time, so the 450 miles of road is going to grow too. So we better get on this and find a way to do it. 13 million of actual funding. You know, we're not even hitting the 20 or 25% mark of our entire amount that we bring in. So we really got to dig in. So if you break it down, sometimes it's easier to understand when you break down the numbers of $38.5 million. That's $2 million a month we need to find. We need to find that money and put it into our streets. And our infrastructure and get that improvement. We all know as we've been knocking on doors, as we've been on that side trying to get to this side, that one of the number one requests from our citizens is, how are you going to fix our streets? So it is something that does need a plan. And I believe with the $2 million a month goal, I think we can find that plan. And if we really knock it down, surely there's $70,000 a day out there, right? It's got to be somewhere. So I thank you. I think it is addressed. I'm glad that we're acknowledging it, but I truly believe as a council member that the discussion isn't done it's probably going to get even better from here. Thank you.
Jason Solomon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I also want to thank Councilman Wright for bringing this to our attention and for the staff in Public Works for putting all that together. It is nice to get a hard figure on what we're talking about. There are different ways of looking at this. So I agree that we are going to have some major issues on the streets and our infrastructure in general. And I think that as a city, we have to put first things first, and that means getting our essential services down. These are things that taxpayers expect, things like roads, water systems, stormwater, sewage, et cetera. Those are law enforcement, fire services, you name it. Those are first things first, and I think that's the bare minimum that our city expects, so I agree with that. I do get a little nervous, to be honest, about talking about raising taxes, because I believe the solution to this issue is actually a stronger economy, not raising taxes. So I'd rather the taxpayers have more money in their pocket to spend, because our number one revenue source is sales tax. And here's the deal. I don't believe we can tax our way to a stronger economy. I think that we need to encourage more spending, create conditions for growth, build our economy, and that way we grow our revenue, not by raising taxes, but by collecting more, because people are spending more, buying houses, buying cars, buying laptops, you name it. So there's different ways that we have to approach this other than just a funding source right now. It is about the rising tide raising all ships. So how do we as a city council build a stronger economy, encourage economic development, encourage growth, encourage people to move here, build their lives here, spend their money here, encourage better jobs. And so as we make decisions on things like development and zoning and even taxes, what can we do to grow our economic base that will help pay for these things? Because we're talking about the long term. $25 million a year, or is there a month? Like, it's a lot of money. Councilwoman Doyle was just mentioning to me, I hope it's okay, but she had mentioned that even if we doubled our property taxes, it wouldn't be enough. But sales tax is our number one revenue. And so how do we encourage that? And I'd like to look at solutions such as that for our long-term plan. But Councilman Wright is absolutely correct. Sometimes driving down the streets is a little embarrassing. And to see, and I'll go to my parents' house and their streets just falling apart. Thankfully, it's on the plan in 2019. I did see to get updated, but that should not be. And in the long term, we have to think about that. But you got to look at growing revenue, not so much by raising taxes, but by raising our economic engine in the area. And with that, I'll yield the floor. Thank you.
Steve Laurenti.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to say quickly, because I spoke a little bit about this at the Legal and Finance meeting, and I want to thank Jerry for bringing it up. We've talked about this many times. For some of us who've been on the council for a while, Jerry has specifically brought this up, and we've talked about it many times. The challenge is that revenue would help. Increasing sales tax obviously would help, and that's something we always need to do. But what has to change is government. What has to change is the will of the people you've elected. And so we have an election coming up in June of this year. Elections are extremely important. The reason your infrastructure is underfunded, and always has been underfunded, is because of the people that we have elected, because they have made other priorities other than our public safety and our infrastructure. If we keep thinking we can keep increasing revenue, that will help marginally. But the true fix is electing people, knowing those people who are going to fill that office, that you're going to go into that booth and vote for, know specifically how they will prioritize infrastructure and how they will fund it, which is most importantly. So we have an election in June. I just want to challenge the citizens of Rapid City to go out, or not go out, but talk to the people who are going to run for office when they come to your door, or call them, because they'll have ads, they'll have handouts that you'll be able to call them and ask those specific hard questions. Because ultimately, we do have the money to fix the streets and take care of the infrastructure and make sure that our police and fire is first class. They are, but they struggle with funding. That problem is the root cause is prioritizing the funding and the spending of your taxpayer dollars. That is purely it. We have the ability to take care of all those things today, and we could have done it decades ago, but the problem is we can't get enough elected officials to make that the first priority, and it should be government's first priority. So I challenge citizens to know that about their candidates before they go cast votes this June. Thank you.
John Roberts.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I want to thank Jerry, too, for bringing this forward. We've had this come forward a couple times, like Mr. Lorente said. A few of us that have been on the council for a while have seen this, discussed this, looked at options on this. You know, another elephant in the room, and I hate to bring this up because it's a difficult subject, is a vision fund. Unfortunately, the vision fund has, or not unfortunately, fortunately, the vision fund has done many, many, many wonderful projects in Rapid City. And it's also caused a lot of stress on our general fund because we've done all of these projects for years and years and years and years, and there's operational expenses to these projects that we've done. And also, typical municipalities have that 2 cents that goes into their general fund, and we lose a half a cent to the vision fund. And I'm not saying we should get rid of the vision fund, but there are some of us that have advocated for years of using more of that money for our infrastructure, if nothing else, to get caught up on some of these things. So, you know, I do believe what Mr. Lorente said. We do have the money. I don't think we need to raise taxes. I hate to see that, you know, the EOC meetings today looking at, that didn't happen because we didn't get enough council members, but looking at some of the assessments that are coming in for these people and what their taxes are now, there's a lot of people out there that are getting to the tipping point of not being able to afford their houses. So we really have to prioritize and spend our money wisely. So anyway, thank you very much.
Amanda Scott.
Thank you, Mayor. And then I know there's been a lot of discussion about better use of our existing revenue stream, which is that is one option. But dovetailing on the comment that Alderman Solomon mentioned, and that is encouraging economic growth within our area, that I just wanted to bring up that the City Council, and I know we've currently had discussion that we need to be a little bit more proactive. We do have our comprehensive plan, but one of the things that we can also do as a City Council is when these projects are coming forward, we really need to stop sprawling out and increasing the number of roads and the number of infrastructure and really concentrate on trying to get infill in our city and trying to get those areas in our city that are open and available for building. So I know there's been discussion on the City Council of probably trying to revamp some of the TIF things in order to try to encourage some of that infill, because I know the developing cost within the city can be a little bit more expensive than actually going outside to the outskirts of the city, and that kind of lends itself to that sprawling effect. But if you really stop and think about it, when you get the numbers from the Public Works Department, we keep increasing the miles and miles of our infrastructure, whether it's streets or water or sewer, and a lot of our project money is going back to those new things rather than being opened up so that we can go back and get on a maintenance and repair schedule of what we already have existing. So great discussion, and thank you, Jerry, for bringing it. But I just wanted to push out there too. It's not all about identifying a revenue stream or shifting funds. That is part of it. But the other part of it is I think it's going to take the entire community to kind of come to the table and say, we really need to help the city out, and instead of sprawling out, we need to kind of concentrate on seeing what we can do to free up some of the city's money to repair some other stuff rather than expanding all the time. I know we're trying to build a kingdom here, but I think we kind of need to take a breather. Thanks.
Okay, we have a motion and a second on the floor to acknowledge the report. All in favor of that motion say aye. Aye. Opposed say no. Motion carries. Takes us on to item number 42, which is to approve award of total bid for vacuum street sweeper to Sheehan Mac Sales and Equipment, open March 14th, 2017 to Eddie's Truck Center in the amount of $248,575. We'll go to Dale Tech.
Yes, the reason I asked for this to be pulled is the agenda title is incorrect. It makes an award to two companies, and that is incorrect. The title of this should be approve award of total bid for vacuum street sweeper to Sheehan Max Sales and Equipment, opened on March 14, 2017, in the amount of $248,575.
Okay, is there going to be a motion on the modified agenda item? Okay, motion by Doyle and seconded by, let's say Solomon this time. All in favor of that motion, say aye. Aye. Opposed, say no. Motion passes. Okay, that concludes the consent items. Now on to non-consent items, items 45 through 63. We'll open public comment on those items, and we have some speaker requests. And we'll go first to Clancy Kingsbury on item number 45. And just in case I forget to let everyone know, you have 3 minutes to speak up here.
Sure. Thank you. Good evening, Mayor, members of the council. Thank you for letting me speak. My name is Clancy Kingsbury. I own some retail stores downtown here. One of those is Who's Hobby House. It's started in Rapid City in 1950. I've owned it for more than 20 years myself. Item number 45 is in regard to ordinance number 6113 brought by the Parks Department. I just wanted to express some of my concerns with that, mostly with certain sections, 1224-150, which is the fireworks, 1224-090, operation of motorboats, and 1224-180, remote control vehicles. We'll start with the remote control vehicles. The way it's worded, it's very all-encompassing. There's radio control models the size of matchbox cars. Under this ordinance, those would be illegal, basically. One of the fastest growing radio control segments is small rock crawling vehicles. They have very soft tires, very articulated suspensions, and they're made to crawl rocks in difficult terrain, much like their full-size counterparts. These, because of their low torque or high torque gearing, they only go 2 to 4 miles per hour top speed. Radio controlled tanks, those are, again, very slow. The AMA, which is Academy of Model Aeronautics, has categorized small airplanes weighing less than 2 pounds, not being powered by a internal combustion engine as park flyers. Those would not be allowed under this ordinance. By contrast, a large airplane weighing 5 pounds, using an internal combustion engine and controlled by its pilot by 50 to 70 foot steel cables circling around him would be fine. It's not radio control. I see there's something wrong with that picture. When I was at a buying trip in New York just recently, I bought some miniature submarines, micro submarines. These would be illegal to use below Canyon Lake in the overflow areas of Roosevelt Park. Sailboats by the wind, powered by the wind, illegal. So I know I'm running out of time, but the other one was operation of motorboats. That same sailboat, if it has an electric motor to retrieve it in case the wind dies, would be prohibited under this ordinance because it's a powered boat. And then lastly, I'll just finish up real quick here, the fireworks. The term rocket in there, I think that needs to be removed. I sell a lot of rockets that are powered merely by air or by water. Those are going to be covered under this ordinance. So I think it needs to be reworked and relooked at. It's going to cover an expansive definition of all of these models, and I think I think it just needs to be looked at a little bit more. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And now we'll go to Jamie Schur.
I want to thank you guys all for your service. I echo pretty much what Clancy said. One of the primary things that my family does when we go to the parks is we'll almost always bring some type of remote control vehicle with us, whether it's something small that fits in the palm of your hand or a very slow surface vehicle like a boat or a car. The way it's written now, it would completely ban us from using those at all shape and form. It does say designated areas, which we don't have yet. So by essential, kind of just banning everything. Further investigation onto this, some more resources, looking at what the AMA has. They have many, many guidelines that can just be put forth and use those, allowing all of us to use the parks just as everybody else has, and thereon. And that's about all I got for you guys. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Okay, now moving on to another speaker request on item 49. Ed, and is it Anderson? Anders?
Good evening, Mayor and council members. It actually covers several of these, but my main concern is South Valley Drive. I know this development is going to go in, but you guys need to take care of us. That should be a 3-lane highway from the southern edge of that property all the way up to East St. Patrick. And it needs, the road is supposedly too high, so some engineer needs to study that road so that it is done properly. And if you take a drive down South Valley Drive, a couple of miles down in there, there's a lot of agricultural land. So you can't look at the present, you gotta look at the future, because they're gonna be in there developing that in the future. So why spend money now cheaply when if you do it better, you won't have to spend it again? And we want somebody to watch our street, because we don't want the end of our street to look like the East Street. That's all I got. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. And next on the same item, let's see if we can get Bruce and Ellen Rook to come up.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. I'm here, I'm a homeowner that lives off South Valley Drive. I own a home on South Valley Drive and Garden Lane. And we're not opposed to them developing on that 40 acres. Okay, that's a misconception that people are saying about the residents of South Valley Drive. We're not opposed to it. What we're opposed to is that it being turned into a medium density residential area, which means apartment buildings going in there, okay? So if any of you have not driven on South Valley Drive, you need to drive up there. It's a dirt road covered with asphalt. That's all it is, okay? I was going to put concrete driveway in. I had a developer come out and look at it and says, the road is five inches higher than my, 5 inches higher than my driveway or my garage. So I'm gonna have water runoff in there. It's very unsafe for the kids that walk up and down that road. We have pictures of a young couple that were walking up there today pushing a baby stroller, 1-year-old. Cars having to go out around them. There's nowhere for them to walk. Mr. Shaffey is going to put sidewalks in, but he's only going to put it to the end of his property with streetlights. There's a lot of South Valley Drive, guys. It goes all the way to Elkville Drive, Elkville Road. I encourage you to go up there and drive South Valley Drive, go to the top of that road, and look at what condition that road is in. There was potholes that would absolutely eat a car alive. They fixed it, and you can see the size of the potholes that were fixed. Okay, the speed that people drive to connect from Elkville Drive to St. Pat Street, the speed is ridiculous. I mean, I've called several times. I know other homeowners have called several times. I know a few residents have chased down some of the speeders, you know, and I know one speeder one day was doing at least 80. That's a 25-mile-an-hour speed zone, okay? Since we were annexed, we haven't had a solid law enforcement presence. Recently, since we've brought it up at the council with Mayor Allender and some of the council members, we've had more of a presence out there, and speed has slowed down. That's all it's taken. But we're not wanting the multifamily residential area in there. We fought them putting a trailer court in there a few years back. They wanted to change it to medium density residential. They changed it. They listened to us. They put Habitat for Humanity homes in there. And there's pride in ownership. But for the increased traffic that's going to be from on South Valley Drive with this development going in there with the convenience store, right now kids don't go to the convenience store on 44 because they have to cross St. Pat and 44. Parents don't let those kids go down there. But with the convenience store going to be right on the corner, there is going to be a lot more foot traffic, and there is no sidewalks, there is no lights. You know, so it is going to be a hazard. You know, you guys talk about road conditions. I heard you guys talk about road conditions and funding. Who's going to fund South Valley Drive? It needs to be redone. There's no curb, there's no gutters. We pay for drainage, drains into my yard. You know, so you guys need to really come out there and take a look at South Valley Drive. I really appreciate it. And stop and talk to some of the homeowners. Thank you.
Okay, Ellen? You see how this light works? As soon as it turns red, he stops talking. You want to take one of these home?
Yeah, I do. Could I please? One in each room. But yeah, as he said, we have no street lights, we have no sidewalks. I went around and took pictures today. I had a disc card with pictures on. I'd like to have you see the condition of the road and see the traffic where these kids have to walk. I filmed some of, or not filmed, but I took pictures of some of the kids getting off the school bus today and stuff, but I did not get it down here early enough to have it tested and checked out. But I do encourage you to go down and look at the potholes, look at the repair that they had to do this last year after the runoff, but we had to wait a long time to get that done. And, you know, that road's eventually going to be a connector road. There's a bridge on it that's only 2 lane. You can't make 3 lanes going through that bridge. So there's a huge expense on reconstructing that road to be a connector road now, and it should be done prior to the development. We strongly do not want the medium-density residential. We've got 56 kids getting on that bus and riding the bus and getting off of it. When you put in the development that they're suggesting down there, we're going to double that. And those kids are going to make friends with the kids on the other end of the street on that school bus. There's going to be foot traffic going back and forth to do, whether it be home projects or school projects and things like that. Boredom in the summer, they're going to be running back and forth to meet each other, and they certainly are going to be making trips to the convenience store and back. And it's not safe. We lost a young boy to a little patch of water down there, and it devastated the community. And 1 child lost is one too many. So I do think you need to consider the safety of the children out there. And that's all I have to say.
Okay, thank you. And if you want to stand by for a second, I think Kelsey will be coming out to, she can get your memory card and copy it, and we'll share those with the council.
Okay.
She'll come out here in a minute. Okay, on the same item, Cody Champion.
I'm Cody Champion from the South Valley Homeowners. I don't want to be too redundant here, but as you might have noticed, we brought a lot of backup. Everybody raise their hand from South Valley. That's just a portion of them. There's a lot of concerns on this, and this is one thing I want to thank Jerry right now for kicking that particular can into the middle of the dinner table instead of down the road. But on this development, we're certainly not against the development per se, and we're not against the developer. I've known him for too long. One of the things that we are concerned about is the small lot size. The city standards are 6,500 square feet with a minimum frontage of 51 feet. These lots are, there's a certain amount of them, about 30 of them are smaller than normal, with the stated idea that it would bring down the price for entry-level homes. Well, if you stop and figure it out, one of the things you're going to do there is, with the smaller lot size, they'll put in sprinkler systems in the houses, which I totally agree, every new house should have one, period. I don't care where it's at. But you're not going to bring that price down that much. It's not going to affect the sale of the homes or the feasibility of people moving into them. However, it does affect, to a certain extent, the pride and the options of the homeowners. When you've got a small lot with very narrow easements, it really limits your options to what you can do down the road. So it will tend to make them a more temporary situation. They're gonna live there 5 years. Well, now we can afford a bigger place, so let's move. Rather than becoming a part of our little community. With a larger lot, they can stay, be happier. Hopefully they'll raise their kids there like we did. We raised our kids, half of our grandkids. We've been there 30 years, you know. So that's one of our main concerns. We did have a concern with a privacy fence being erected between the homeowners on Eden Lane and the new development. I believe we've taken care of that. The other thing is, again, the medium density designation. We truly would like to see that lower density, or at least downsized to a smaller area. It's not a area that we feel is conducive to medium density. This is basically a small community there and very involved with each other and the city. We kind of like to keep it that way. And the whole thing boils down to, whether it's a development, the streets, or infrastructure, do it right the first time. Because if you don't have a good foundation under a building, the whole thing falls down. That's the same way with the city. So let's do this whole thing, let's do it right, and then we don't have to worry about it down the road. Thank you.
Thank you. Now switching items, on item number 60, Hanny Shafi.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and council members, and I thank our neighbors for coming down to voice their concerns, which we want to take into consideration. As far as South Valley Drive, as far as the development is intended to have a mixed-use facility, which hopefully will help our neighbors and help develop this infill area and generate some jobs and generate sales tax. The area in red is general commercial fronting the arterials, and the MDR is going to be developed, and it will be developed with what they call a PRD, a planned residential unit development, which will be consulting with our neighbors on the quality and the height and the size and the number of units that will be built on that site. As far as the residential size of lots, even though the size of lots has been approved by the Planning Commission and the setbacks have been granted by the Planning Commission and there has not been appeal by our neighbors and the appeal period has expired, it is our job to really make sure that their concerns are taken into consideration, and we will continue to consult with them. And if we find out that the size of lots need to be altered, even though the appeal period has expired, we will take their consideration into account and address them and modify our laws to fit with their needs. As far as the appeal before you in item 60, this is South Valley Drive. It does look in this portion of the road fronting our property better than 95% of the roads within that area and better than majority of the roads in Rapid City. You have granted those exceptions in the past to widen the road, and before we requested this final approval, we had a consultant who the city uses a lot and the state uses a lot for their studies to conduct a traffic study. The traffic study, which we sent you a copy of, indicates that there are no needs for any turn lanes within South Valley Drive. The traffic counts are very low, and as the property to the south, as a matter of fact, the recommendations are to the year 2037 that there are no improvements as for a traffic geometrics of that road needed on South Valley Drive. Consistent with the standards policy, so the traffic study was one item to support our request. Then the consistent policy of the city has approved such exceptions in so many places. Creek Drive is one of them. Country Road and Nike Road are another one. The city itself actually extended about 1,200 feet of South Valley Drive without curb and gutter and only for 2 lanes. The infrastructure criteria manual that the city has allowed 24 feet as highlighted. A 32-foot width is required if there is a turn lane, which the traffic study states that there is no need for one. A rural section is allowed by the city, so that means curb and gutter are not needed if you're conducting drainage, which we intend to improve quite a bit. We will be putting sidewalks and street lights along the street. The bridge, as stated, it was too narrow. I'll be available for any further questions that you may have. Thank you.
Thank you. Now on to item number 62, Bob Skull.
Good evening, Council, Mayor. Bob Skull, RCS Construction. Come here before you regarding item 62, the water reclamation facility bid, and just kind of explain my position. I was a low bidder on that back on February 28th. On March 3rd, I gave a notice that I had an error in my bid. And I guess I'm coming before you to request that you deny or reject my bid. I've been a contractor in Rapid City for 32 years, 7 with my brother, and 25 as RCS Construction. I've worked probably every one of those years on projects for the city of Rapid City. I think I've always done a good job for the city. I thought we've had a good relationship, and I've always tried to do good work, good quality work, timely work, and at a fair price, too. But for some reason, it has come before you that my bond should be taken for withdrawing my bid. And it's kind of a surprise to me. Like I said, 32 years in business, and I've seen dozens of projects, not only with the city of Rapid City, but the county, various communities around, the school system, where contractors have made mistakes, sometimes very large mistakes, and been allowed to withdraw their proposal. And in 32 years, never seen a contractor penalized by taking a bond. So I've really been taken aback by staff's position on this issue. And I know I've talked to some of you, and I really do appreciate you taking the time to meet with me. But I guess mostly I'm just saying I'm the guy, I made the mistake, and it was me, it wasn't anybody in my office. And I hope you consider this matter when you get to it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And also on item 62, Jim Skull.
Well, good evening, Mayor and Council. For me, this has a personal interest too. First of all, he's my brother, but that doesn't have anything to do with it because he's a heck of a competitor. I mean, this guy's tough, and he has done a lot of work. But for the construction industry as a whole in my firm, I have to also say I've bid thousands of jobs, and we've made a handful of mistakes over the years. And when they're legitimate and they're clerical, I've never had one not be forgiven by a public entity. It'd be highly unusual. It's precedent setting. The federal acquisition regulations clearly has a ways and means that if you made a legitimate mistake and you justify it, you can withdraw your bid. The state has a statute, clearly. They don't intend to penalize somebody for a mistake. Because oftentimes, if you've never done the process, in the last 30 minutes, when you have 50 or 75 items to write in, and clerical staff is writing items, and people are just busting butt to get it all done, I'm telling you, things can happen. A lot of times they wash out, and we go along, and we're good, and sometimes when you make an error like this, which what I'm understanding is about 10%, and clearly a clerical, when it's 6,600 instead of 66,000, and even the engineer's estimate is 67,000, it's pretty clear. So when you start this kind of a precedent setting, you kind of put the fear of God in us contractors. Because we're human. Things happen. People make mistakes. But you don't expect somebody, even in the private sector, they don't come to you and say, oh, you made a mistake. Good one. Good for me, huh? No, you have a conversation about it, it's pretty civil, and you work it out. So I would encourage you to take a hard look at this. This is precedent setting from my point of view. I don't remember ever this happening with the city, with the school, with the county, with the state, with the feds. You know, it's just a system of fairness we work under. So thank you for your time, appreciate it.
Thank you. Now also on item 62, Hanny Shaffey.
Thank you, Mayor and council members. I just want to let you know, both Jim Skaw and Bob Skaw have done a lot of projects with the city and have done some projects. I have not done a lot with Bob, but the two that I've done with him were really great. And he's done a good job. As far as precedent, we just opened a bid not even 40 days ago on a project in which the contractor made an honest mistake of about $110,000, which is about $20,000 of that bid. I mean, 20% of that bid. We did not force that contractor or take his bond away and force him to do the job. It was an honest mistake, just similar to what RCS has done. We as a community or as a city, we set the precedent for the private sector. We were good enough in our industry and as a private individual to really grant that contractor a way out. That way he does not go broke or does not have to bounce some checks for his contractors. Not in this case, Bob and Jim, they're strong enough to survive that. But if we set the precedent as a public entity, which most private people are going to follow, we're going to create issues within our community. So I urge you to support Bob's request. Thank you.
Thank you. And that takes us through the speaker requests on these items, so we'll close public comment and we'll go to item number 45 and ask our legal finance chairman if he would read these items in.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Item 45, second reading, ordinance number 6113, an ordinance to amend park use regulations by amending Chapter 12.24 of the Rapid City Municipal Code, and I am not going to make a recommendation on this one.
Okay, we'll go to Amanda Scott.
Thank you, Mayor. May I ask Mr. Jeff Bigler a question or two, please?
Yes.
Thank you. Jeff, as you're approaching the podium, this is in second reading at this time, and it's not uncommon for the City Council to pass first reading on an ordinance and then continue the second reading for a while as we kind of work through and make sure that any issues or potential misunderstandings regarding an ordinance are addressed. Is there any reason, in your opinion, why we could not postpone this again and allow a little bit more time for the issues that were brought forward to be reconsidered by your department with interested parties?
No, there probably isn't. The only section in there that might pose an issue would be that of the food truck in the vending ordinance, the vending section of the ordinance. But I don't see that a short period would be objectionable to anyone. I will say that Mr. Kingsbury brought up some good points, and he's an expert on radio-controlled apparatus, and I'd be more than willing to work with him in setting out these designated areas. The intent of this is not to prohibit all radio-controlled vehicles and everything from all parks. It's just to find the appropriate place for that activity while still protecting the park and protecting those other users of the park.
So based on the comments that you heard tonight, what is your recommendation of a reasonable amount of time to take a look at this if the City Council so chooses to continue this to a next City Council meeting?
I would not do the next City Council meeting, but the following one, only because I'm going to be out of the office next week and I would not have an opportunity to personally work on it.
So you're thinking it would be okay to at least go out to the second council meeting in April, if not the first council meeting in May?
Yes, I think the second in April would be sufficient.
All right. Thank you. And I know, and I applaud your office for working through a lot of these things because, and I really want to thank our citizens for going through these ordinances, because as city council members, we try to make sure that we read them, but I'll tell you, as we read through the language, we just kind of go, yeah, that makes sense, because we understand what the intent was. It really helps us when a fresh set of eyes takes a look at that and then comes back and says, I don't read it this way, because that gives us an opportunity to make sure that the intent is actually set out so that it makes it a little bit more clear as far as where or what things are allowed, because we certainly don't want to discourage business, and we do want to make sure that everybody can enjoy the parks and do those activities. It's been a long time since I've had radio or gas-powered airplanes out with my dad, but I remember those days and I enjoyed them a lot. So thank you. I'll yield the floor.
Jerry Wright.
I make a motion to this item be continued till its second meeting in April.
Okay, the second to that motion was by Steve Laurenti, I think. You still have, do you need the floor still? Okay, Jason Solomon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If I can ask a couple more questions to Mr. Beegler, just as you are reworking this a little bit and working with various groups, one of the things in there that I've received quite a bit of feedback, and it's made me pause and say, you know, there might be some good points. One that I talked to you about last time was the hours of operation. I would prefer 5 a.m. year round rather than just in a summertime and springtime, but that's something I would like you to consider for the winter joggers, all 3 of them. But I'm kidding, obviously I don't jog. But the other part of it was some folks have brought to my attention the loafing aspect. And the ordinance as it's written speaks about loafing in our parks. And can you clarify the changes that you're making to address that?
Hold on, let me grab my glasses here. The current version of this ordinance does contain the language that no person shall act in a disorderly, unchaste, or lewd manner, or habitually loaf or sleep on the ground or on benches in any city park. That term habitually loaf is kind of an archaic term for kind of wandering aimlessly and not having a purpose. And really that's kind of what we like to encourage in the parks, is to go out into the park and really not have a reason to be there, but just to enjoy the parks and to enjoy and take in all the nature of the parks and the trails and the natural areas. And so that was just 2 words that we wanted to strike from that section. It's in there now. We don't think it's appropriate. It's just the language is just old and unnecessary.
And I appreciate you doing that. That's a stupid word. Get rid of it. Because that's what the park is for enjoyment for everybody.
Yep.
The other pushback that some folks have mentioned is they think that perhaps the updates on the ordinance to say habitually sleeping is targeting our homeless population. What's your response to that?
Oh, not at all. I mean, that's not at all the intent, and it hasn't been. I don't think anyone's been really been called or ticketed on taking a nap in the park. That again is something that a lot of people do. It's a very serene environment, and if someone wants to go sit under a tree and take a nap, or while their kids are playing on the play equipment, that's not an issue whatsoever, and it was never intended to be kind of a statement against homelessness.
Okay. And third and final one. We're very specific about dogs,
Yes.
that we allow leash dogs.
Yep.
And obviously in the unleashed portion they can be, but what about people who have other types of pets? Are we saying they should not be allowed? Can you explain the I'm not even going to try to say the word, the specificity? I hear you guys up here correcting me. Why just dogs rather than, I'm sure if our 70,000 population, somebody has a cat they like to walk, or boa constrictor or something.
I'm sure there are people that would like to bring their boa constrictor to the parks. Dogs have been kind of universally accepted in parks. People go to a park and they're not surprised or shocked to see a dog. And we've put in language to require dog owners to keep them on a leash or some sort of control, verbal control, to make sure that they are not running at large. We've also set aside areas, 5 different areas in the city where dogs can be off-leash. So we put this in because we think that dogs are certainly welcome under those situations, and we don't want to encourage people to bring animals that might conflict with the dogs that are out there. Cats are fine and everything, but I don't think I'd want to take a cat to the off-leash dog park and let it run loose. So it's something that we've seen in a number of other sample park ordinances, and so it's something that we thought we'd put in there. I think it's reasonable to go to a park and see a dog, but I think if you were with your kids and there was an iguana or a boa constrictor running around, it might not be so much fun for the parent or the child.
And that's just my final point. The tough part about parks is you want to please everybody. You can't.
Yes.
We're trying to all play together and play well together, and sometimes it takes some reasonable regulation. I do not like over-regulation at all, but some reasonable regulation. That's why you're trying to write this with that spirit in mind, I hope.
Yes.
Okay, I'll yield the floor. Thank you.
Alderman Solomon will yield his 0 seconds of his time. Lisa Modrick.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Bigler, I really appreciate the work you're doing. I know that we sent you back, and then you came back, and then we sent you back, and you're back again. And we're going to bring you back again, I think. But that's all good, because it is a public space. It's a public environment. It's something that we all enjoy. The question, I think, I've got a couple of questions, but one of the ones that I have, and I think Jason, your conversation, Councilman Jason Solomon had said about over-regulating, but my question is why when when the department is looking at new regulations and cleaning up some of the language, why are you placing regulations without incidents? Because I don't believe there's been an incident, for example, on the radio-controlled equipment. I don't think we've reached that point. Unless there has been, you can certainly let me know about that. And then when the document comes before me, I'm uncomfortable when I see things like designated locations, and then we don't have the designated location. So it's really hard to say, all right, are we doing good for everyone, and are we going to designate the radio control in the dog park? I mean, that could be pretty messy, really. This is for the families. It's for generations. When Amanda had stated that, my grandfather took me out, on the first time we went to a park. That's where you go. And it was an amazing experience. And then here comes the rest of the generations reliving that. So those are some of the things I think that we're kind of picking at. And what we're finding is maybe there's a little more review that we need to do on council, and maybe with you in a format that just finishes the tweaking of this, because you're modernizing it, and yet we still have subjects in there that maybe don't have incidents. So, and if you can state maybe there's been some incidents that brought this to your table, that would help me too, if you could.
We have had a number of incidents, and those are addressed in this. We've had open fires. We've had vehicles driving through parks. So those are things that we're trying to nip in the bud. We're trying to be able to approach those people that really aren't treating the parks the way they should be treated, and say, there is an ordinance that prohibits you doing this. Not that we're going to call the police every time that we see somebody doing something that we don't want, but it gives us the opportunity to then inform them that there has been some thought that went into protecting this valuable resource that is the park system, and also to protect the people that are enjoying the parks. Mm-hmm. So some of these additions are a result of issues that we've experienced. Some are issues that we want to get ahead of. And the RC radio-controlled areas is one that we do want to get ahead of. We've had a few conversations with one of the Rapid City Prop Busters, who is the radio-controlled airplane group that looking for a location within town. So we know that there is that activity happening in our parks now. We just want to make sure that it's happening in a location that's going to be safe for the people who are using the radio-controlled planes, as well as people who are also in the parks.
I like the idea that you had said, maybe I need to get together and bring it back into the community, and you know, really if we use our own tools, we can really go far fast. And our tools are business owners and those that use the parks that can really share and help the division. But we've been, like, we give you a group and then you fix it and then you come back and now here we are we're gonna give you another group, and I have a feeling we've got 3 or 4 more on the list. So I know we're saying let's bring it back by a motion, but I think maybe a motion with direction might be in order, because we're going to send it back without direction. So maybe you can even assist that if the next council person wants to talk to you, because I'm about out of time. Thank you, Mr. Bigler, and do thank everybody as well.
Thank you.
Good we have policies.
John Roberts.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And thank you, Jeff, for all your hard work you're putting into this. It's been very interesting. There's been lots of contact from the public on different parts of this ordinance. You know, one of the things that I am concerned about is how we are going to enforce some of these things. You know, right now our police department's overtaxed, you know, and I feel sorry for them when they get the call about the cat on the leash in the park, you know, or maybe the crazy councilman with one of his Amazon parrots on his shoulder, you know, because I guess that will be illegal. I can't take my birds to the park anymore. So, you know, and I think that you're going to find that, I hope the ordinance doesn't get abused, you know, I really do. But even if it does, we're going to have a difficult time enforcing it. You know, and I understand what you're trying to do with a lot of it, but when you just blanket everything and just say, this isn't, you know, because like Mr. Kingsbury was saying, there's all kinds of different types of radio-controlled vehicles, and I remember my stepchildren, when they were younger, taking them to the park with their radio-controlled cars and how much fun they had, and, you know, how much fun I had. And I guess I hate to see that happen to people, that they can no longer do that in the park. You know, if it's becoming a problem and they're becoming a nuisance to other people, I can see where, you know, that can be an issue. But just to ban it everywhere, I have a hard time with that.
It's, again, it's not our intent to ban it completely, but just try to place it in the appropriate location for both the activity and for the rest of the.
Okay, where will my parrots be appropriate, Jeff? I'm just curious.
Maybe in your backyard.
Thank you.
Darla Drew.
Thank you, Mayor. I too have been contacted by many of my constituents, and the jogging regulation is certainly something they're concerned about, so I'd like to echo Alderman Solomon's words on that, keeping it to a 5 a.m. time period. And not to beleaguer this point, but you know, there are different pets that people might bring to the park. You might remember the miniature goats from a few years ago, pot-bellied pigs. There's a lot of different types of pets that people are looking at now that aren't cats, that could be on leashes. So maybe it's just pets in the park would be a better recommendation than dogs. And, you know, then people would think they would have to keep the other pets on a leash as well. So thank you. That's it.
Jerry Wright.
One quick question for you, Jeff. Has the discussion from the council tonight, which is videotaped, is that enough direction for you to come up with something by April?
I believe it is, yes.
I do too, so thank you.
Okay, we have a motion to postpone this item to the April 17th council meeting, which will be for second reading unless the ordinance substantially changes, which it doesn't sound like it will. But all in favor of that motion, say aye. Opposed, say no. Motion carries. Item 46, please.
Second reading ordinance number 6167, an ordinance narrowing the municipality licensing requirements for ambulances by amending section 5.16.010 and 5.16.020 of the Rapid City Municipal Code, and I recommend approval.
Second by Jerry Wright. All in favor of approval, say aye. Aye. Opposed, say no. Motion carries.
Item 47, first reading ordinance 6160, an ordinance amending section 17.06 of chapter 17 of the Rapid City Municipal Code, a request by Fisk Land Surveying and Consulting Engineers Incorporated for HER Enterprises LLC for rezoning from General Commercial District to Light Industrial District for a property generally described as being located 1002 East Omaha Street, and I recommend approval in conjunction with a planned development designation.
Second by Darla Drew. All in favor of approval, say aye. Aye. Opposed, say no. Motion carries.
48, first reading ordinance 6161, an ordinance amending section 17.06 of chapter 17 of the Rapid City Municipal Code, a request by KTM Design Solutions Incorporated for Black BH Capital LLC for a rezoning from no use district to low density residential district 1 for property generally described as being located southeast of East St. Patrick Street and South Valley Drive intersection, and I recommend approval.
Second by Steve Laurenti. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Motion carries.
49, first reading ordinance 6162, an ordinance amending section 17.06 of chapter 17 of the Rapid City Municipal Code, a request by KTM Design Solutions, Inc., for BH Capital LLC for rezoning from no use district to medium density residential district 1 for property generally described as being located southeast of East St. Patrick Street and South Valley Drive intersection, and I recommend approval.
Okay, second by Darla Drew. All in favor of approval, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Item 50, first reading ordinance 6163, an ordinance amending section 17.06 of chapter 17 of the Rapid City Municipal Code, a request by KTM Design Solutions, Inc. for BH Capital LLC for rezoning from no use district to general commercial district for property generally located southeast of East St. Patrick Street and South Valley Drive intersection, and I recommend approval.
Second by Steve Laurenti. All in favor of approval, say aye. Aye. Opposed, say no. Motion carries.
51, first reading ordinance 6164, an ordinance amending section 17.06 of chapter 17 of the Rapid City Municipal Code, a request by KTM Design Solutions, Inc. for BH Capital LLC for rezoning from no use district to general commercial district 1 for property generally described as being located southeast of East St. Patrick Street and South Valley Drive intersection. I recommend approval.
Second by Lisa Modrick. All those in favor of approval, say aye. Aye. Opposed, say no. Motion carries.
Item 52, first reading ordinance 6165, an ordinance amending section 17.06 of chapter 17 of the Rapid City Municipal Code, a request by KTM Design Solutions, Inc. for BH Capital LLC for rezoning from general agricultural district to medium density residential district 1 for property generally described as being located southeast of East St. Patrick Street and South Valley Drive intersection, and I recommend approval.
Second by Jerry Wright. Lisa Modrick.
Thank you, Mayor. You see as the audience that we're rattling these off so fast, and you're all here about these items, so I just wanted to slow us down just a moment so that I could acknowledge with you a lot of work, a lot of preparation. As you know, there's been communication between you as well as with KTM Designs and BH Capital. And you don't want it to go into commercial district or into medium density, but there's such a need for housing of all types. And what they're bringing to us is affordable or workable housing, and the need is great. And we had a conversation about roads just shortly ago, and the talk about doing infill. And this is an infill opportunity, and it's filling the needs as well as filling from within the community. You're also, I believe that there's an opportunity coming as well with the traffic that will come, with the residential sections, that that road that has been unaddressed by county and by city is coming. So we're building traffic, but I see a great future in the development as well as for the community, and I think there's going to be more discussion as we come down. We've got a lot more coming, so be prepared, but there's more discussion when we get to the roads, and I hope to address that as well too. But I just wanted to slow it down a little bit because you're seeing us talk awful fast, and you're part of our plan here. So we're back at it. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, motion on the floor is for approval of item 52. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed say no. Motion carries.
Item 53, first reading ordinance 6166, an ordinance amending section 17.06 of chapter 17 of the Rapid City Municipal Code, a request by KTM Design Solutions, Inc. for BH Capital LLC for rezoning from General Agricultural District to General Commercial District for property generally described as being located southeast of East St. Patrick Street and South Valley Drive intersection, and I recommend approval.
Second by Steve Laurenti. All in favor of approval say aye. Aye. Opposed say no. Motion carries.
Item 54, approve introduction and first reading of ordinance number 6170 regarding supplemental appropriation number 1 for 2017, and I recommend approval.
Second by Steve Laurenti. All in favor of approval say aye. Aye. Opposed say no. Motion carries.
Item 55, first reading ordinance number 6171, an ordinance to update the city's promotion agency for purposes of the municipal gross receipts tax by amending sections 8.18.050, 3.18.060, and 3.18.070 of the Rapid City Municipal Code, and I recommend approval.
Okay, second by Charity Doyle, and just as a correction, it was to amend section 3.18 .050, not 8.18. So we have a motion and approval. Lisa Modrick.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to define what the reading is here because it says city's promotion agency for purposes of municipal. Am I on the wrong number? No, I'm still there. Okay. And I just want to acknowledge what we're discussing here because it doesn't read well in our community, but what we've got is a Convention Visitors Bureau in the city of Rapid City, and the Convention Visitors Bureau is becoming Visit Rapid City. So this is defining that and allowing Visit Rapid City to promote the city for our tourism. So it's just to define the legal words and bring that up, and I'm supporting and approving it, and I think the community is grateful for all that they do. And I hope this approves, and thank you for the work that you're doing, both as the Chamber and the Visitor Rapid City organization.
Okay, motion on the floor is for approval on item 55. All in favor of approval say aye. Aye. Opposed say no. Motion carries. Next on to Community Planning and Development Services items. Item number 56, a request by Fisk Land Surveying and Consulting Engineers Incorporated for Founders Park LLC for a preliminary subdivision plan for Lot 9 of Founders Park subdivision, generally described as being located east of Founders Park Drive. And the recommendation from committee was to approve with stipulations. So moved. So moved by Scott, seconded by Laurenti. All in favor of approval say aye. Aye. Opposed say no. Motion carries. Item 57, a request by KTM Design Solutions Incorporated for Black Hills Capital LLC for a preliminary subdivision plan for lots 1 through 14 of Block 1, lots 1 through 14 of Block 2 of Johnson Ranch subdivision, generally described as being located in the southeast of East St. Patrick and South Valley Drive intersection. The recommendation from committee was to approve with stipulations.
So moved.
Moved by Scott and seconded by Laurenti. Jerry Wright.
Thank you, Mayor. I have a question on 57 and 60 are interrelated. And if there are stipulations, if I remember reading them correctly, do require the turning lane and so forth for the development. Is that correct?
We'll go to Dale Tech.
I believe the way the stipulation is written, it's either make improvements to it or get an exception. So that will be addressed in item 60.
We'll make sure that's okay. Thank you.
Okay, motion on the floor for 57 is for approval. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed say no. Motion carries. Back to our Legal Finance Committee Chair for item 58.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Authorize mayor and finance officer to sign second amended contract for construction of public improvements through private developer tax increment district number 38 between Heartland Retail Center LLC and the city of Rapid City. This was a continuation, so I'm not going to make a recommendation on it.
Okay, need a motion on item 58. Okay, motion to approve by Drew, and was that second by Jerry Wright? All in favor of approval signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? No. Okay, motion passes with one no from Mr. Laurenti. Next item, please.
59, authorize mayor and finance officer to sign third assignment agreement for tax increment district number 38 between the city of Rapid City, Heartland Retail Center LLC, and Core Trust Bank, and I'll recommend approval.
Okay, we have a motion for approval and a second by Darla Drew. All in favor of approval say aye. Aye. Opposed say no. Motion passes with one no for Mr. Laurenti. And now on to Public Works items. We'll go to Charity Doyle.
Thank you, Mayor. Item number 60 is appeal of denial of request from KTM Design Solutions for an exception to waive the requirements for subdivision improvements on South Valley Drive. I'm not going to make a motion just yet, but I would like to ask Hanny Shaffey some questions, if I may.
Okay, Hanny Shaffey.
Thank you, Mr. Shaffey. I know that some of the discussion prior to this was, we've only annexed, or the little portion, the front portion where it abuts St. Patrick Street of South Valley Drive. Did you do any work with the county on a timeline when they're going to come in and remediate, repair the rest of this road? Was there any kind of discussion in that in your process with all of this?
With the county, we only discussed with them annexing the South Valley Drive portion fronting our property. That's the limit of our discussion. And they conceded and gave us a consent to allow that to be annexed.
Okay.
That's the only extent of discussion.
Okay. So we may need to have discussions with the county as to the health of that street. Can you talk a little bit about some of the improvements that you are doing along South Valley Drive?
Along South Valley Drive, we intend to install 5 grant additional right-of-way as required by the city, and we're discussing with Public Works if there is any need for additional right-of-way beyond what is required. And then we're adding a 5-foot sidewalk, and we're adding a street lights, and that's as far as South Valley Drive. And then we're improving the drainage ditch on the east side of the road, and then we're intercepting the drainage before it goes into currently what is Garden Lane. So we're intercepting the drainage coming off of South Valley Drive before it gets to Garden Lane, then we're taking it east within our property to a detention pond on the east end of the property.
That'll be a huge help out there too.
Yes.
Thank you for doing that.
Thank you.
I'll yield for now, but I do appreciate your work on this. Thank you.
Thank you.
Lisa Modrick.
I don't have the touch today. Thank you, Mayor. I did have an opportunity to spend some time out on South Valley Drive last week. It was a lovely sunny day. It was a great day to be there to see how the traffic was flowing, and I followed the report that was provided, and it really was almost spot on from when I was sitting there of how much traffic there was at this current time, and then just trying to envision what the public and what the residents of South Valley Drive in the area are feeling, even the off streets, of what's going to happen when the density increases out there. And I saw opportunity of improvements in many ways, and our councilwoman Doyle also had mentioned something similar in that there needs to be a fix that South Valley Drive goes all the way. One of the improvements that's coming is a stoplight that's going to be at Outvale and East Minnesota, which turns on to South Valley Drive. So now you've got 2 opportunities to go out safely. That's important that we'll have a stoplight on both sides. But now we look at that drive, and as it was mentioned about the potholes and the abandonment by by county responsibility, not having the snow removal. We're incorporating you into the city. I think we need to go even farther, and I think that is, needs to become discussion, because once this development comes, here comes the other things, build it and they will come. So there's some opportunity maybe, especially since you're a formulated neighborhood, that you can bring the neighborhood leadership here, and let's see if we can solve South Valley Drive together, because it's been unresolved for far too long. And that road is a lovely road, and I see it as opportunity where people are going to want to live and where they're going to want to start buying where there is land around you. And so we've got the workable density coming, and then we've got the sprawled homes that are absolutely gorgeous out there. And that road, it needs our attention, and we need to take it all the way to Elkvale, because that's where we are. That's where our city limits are. So we need to get behind this and add 451 miles of roads now, because South Valley Drive needs it. And that traffic's going to head for Elkvale. We're going to put a stoplight there, and we need to expect that those potholes are going to get bigger. And I think it's to our advantage, these are our citizens, to put the repairs on the roads that's necessary, because we're bringing progress to you because we need the workable housing. And so we're going to try to work together on this and make those improvements happen to you. It's going to take some time, but stay involved and keep coming before us, or maybe we'll committee this up somehow. Thank you.
Steve Laurenti.
Thank you, Mayor. If I may, I'd like to ask Mr. Tech a question on this particular agenda item, please.
Yes.
Dale, can you explain staff's what they're looking for, why they're, if you will, not recommending approval of this particular requirement, waiving it? If you could speak about that.
I believe I can. Well, a little history lesson probably is in order here. I'm starting to sound like Jerry Wright. My apologies, but when this subdivision initially came forward, South Valley Drive was all within the county. As part of the initial review, the County Highway Department stated that they wouldn't approve any approaches onto South Valley Drive unless the applicant improved South Valley Drive to a 3-lane road section or have the city annex it. So that's where this exception got started. Since then, the applicant has requested an annexation, and I believe has been approved by the City Council to annex that portion of South Valley Drive to at least what abuts the applicant's property. So that's done. City code or their design criteria manual states that it's a collector road. It should be built to standard 24-foot of width. I believe the applicant has submitted information saying the road is 23 foot wide out there. It's a rural section. There can be some debate whether or not rural sections are allowed in the city. Typically speaking, in new subdivisions, we don't allow rural sections. It's an urban section, much more user-friendly as far as drainage is concerned, parking is concerned, roadside safety is concerned. So the item is before you today to make a decision. You know, staff believes probably something should be done. The applicant has stated his case as to why he doesn't believe anything should be done. Early on in the process, he appeared at the Public Works Committee and stated that he would be making some improvements to the road, adding curb and gutter, doing some things, and based on traffic study that was done on his behalf by his consultant, it states that there's no other lanes necessary, and we agree with that. The traffic volumes out there don't dictate that there should be any lanes necessary, additional lanes. There's not a traffic flow issue. Are there times during the day, during the morning and afternoon rushes where, yeah, there's some inconvenience, but you'll see that all over town on any of our roadways. So the question's before you today, if you want to require him to make any improvements or not. You know, staff will be excited to see what you decide.
So one more question. Those improvements, when they're ultimately needed, I mean, we have a study that says not till past 2037. I don't know if you agree with that, but I mean, it's the study. So my question to you is, who bears the cost of those improvements when they're needed?
Under the current model that we operate under, it'll be the city of Rapid City will be out there reconstructing the street at taxpayers' expense.
So will that be an assessed type of project?
We don't do assessed projects. That's not a practice of ours. So no, it'll be a funded
City will have to
project
find a way to pay for that with the taxpayers' money.
under our current model.
Under our
yes.
current, right, okay. Mr. Shafi, real quickly, if I could ask you a question, please. Mr. Shafi, I supported all of the previous motions because I do think you do a good job with your developments and you work hard with the citizens who surround those developments with the density, you know, the medium density, and working with them on the height and those types of things. So I take you at your word on those particular issues, which is why I supported it. And we do need to fill that. We do need to support fill-in type of development, which is what you're doing here. So I appreciate that. My concern here with this is ultimately who's going to pay for those improvements when they're ultimately needed. And I'm just trying to find out why. I understand there's a cost involved in some of these improvements, but I would think that they would be, from what I'm reading, that they would be reasonable. Do you disagree that they are reasonable?
The improvements that are needed to South Valley Drive, you know, if there is a new turn lane needed, then that would have been an improvement. The curb and gutter, as Mr. Tech mentioned, you know, it is debatable. In this case, actually adding a curb and gutter to the street, and I mentioned that before at Public Works, would require lowering the street by about 1.5 feet, because otherwise, as one of the gentlemen mentioned earlier, the street is higher than most driveways. If you added curb and gutter, then there is no room for the water to come off of those lots to the street,
right,
or to a ditch behind the street. In this case, what we're intending to do is on our side to capture the drainage off of South Valley Drive and intercept it before it gets to our neighbors. So that's the only improvement as far as drainage. Pedestrian traffic is definitely in need of a safe path to that, you know, to St. Patrick Street where there is some retail activity. So therefore, we're adding a 5-foot wide sidewalk on our side.
But that ends at your development, correct?
That's in front of our development along South Valley Drive, and then within our development.
Okay.
All
Right.
the, go ahead, I'm
That's
sorry.
all I needed. Thank you, Mr. Shafi. Thank you.
Jerry Wright.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to probably share with the other people that it's obvious South Valley Drive needs some work. I think I worked on it in 1966. That's another history lesson. We chip sealed it. It's County Highway. It needs to be improved, but I can't see putting the onus of repairing that quarter mile of it is totally upon the developer. I think the street absolutely needs to be addressed sometime in the very near future. We've talked about the need to do better funding and so forth. But I am not in any way, shape, or form willing to put the onus onto Hanny's development. And the traffic study shows that there's no need to widen it. I would suggest maybe that if we approve it, that we look at how we can handle it in 5 to 10 years as a project where we improve it appropriately. I think that's would be, at least publicly, I would say that, so there's some verbal record that this council's talked about it, so we can work it as a project and address it, because probably we need to do maybe some work on the bridge, I don't know, widen it. I think there's some water problems and floods. I remember when that young boy drowned. The water flooding does occur down there. I'm tending to support Hanny's application, but I'd like to see us make a commitment to actively address the issues related to South Valley Drive from St. Pat to Elkvale. Thank you.
Jason Solomon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If I could ask a question to Dale Tech, please.
Yes.
Dale, Hanny just mentioned the fact that the curb and gutter could create some drainage issues. What's your department's take on it? If we were to require curb and gutter, would it, because there's no curb or gutter on the other side, does that create any challenges that defeats the purpose of the requirements?
The biggest issue with trying to retrofit a curb section onto a rural section is they're at the wrong elevation. A rural section is typically elevated to get the drainage off the road and into the road ditch sections. You can't really for lack of a better term, scab a curb on and get it to work, because the water won't get into the curb. It'll be behind the curb. So you've got to lower the entire road section to be able to get the curbs at the correct elevation so the water can flow into the curbs from the side of the road. So to be able to put curb and gutter on a road like this, you've practically got to rebuild the road or widen it to one side, which lowers it a little bit, and you could put the curb on. I think Mr. Chaffee had his design consultant look at adding a third lane there, and it looked like it would work to do that and get the curb at the correct elevation. But the other side of the road, the west side of the road, you'd have to rebuild the road to be able to get a functional curb line in there.
So our options, based on what you said, our option is really to either require the widening of the road, which would bring all of these others, but if we left the road at 23 feet wide, curb and gutter is kind of useless at that.
Yeah, there's really not much you can do with it.
Okay. And is Mr. Chaffee, did he leave? Oh, yeah, I see him. He's coming. He sat down. He was hiding. Mr. Chaffee, what's your response to that about the idea of widening the road and adding curb and gutter? Why not?
You know, in addition to what Mr. Tech has said, the road crown, just to give you an idea, is so variable. Adding a curb and gutter on the existing road is actually even worse challenge than most existing roads. The other one is, if we added curb and gutter to the existing road, unless we have discharge points from the road going to the east, along that road every few hundred feet, it will not work, because we're going to have to add a curb and gutter and then discharge it into a ditch behind the curb and gutter. So it's like we're really not doing anything with the curb and gutter other than wasting money. I would rather give you the money that I would spend on a curb and gutter and go pave some of the dirt streets that are in that neighborhood. Because it really would do more damage than help, without having to rebuild the entire road, which I think, in the near future, you might want to do some of the roads in that area, and in the next 3 or 5 years, you could do that road or redo it if you wish. Yep.
At the Public Works meeting, part of the exception request was for the sidewalks and the lighting, and I see that you brought that back on. What was the reason that you brought back that onto the table?
It was actually probably a typo during the exception request. We always intended to put the sidewalk and the lighting along South Valley Drive.
Okay, all right, thank you.
John Roberts.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Why don't you stay for 1 second, Hanny? This is a very challenging one. I know I've seen some of the projects that you've done, and you want to do the right thing, and I give you credit for that. And I think that the improvements you're going to do within the subdivision, and I know, just by looking across Elkville Road on the other side and what you've done over there, you do a very good subdivision.
Thank you.
So, I have no doubt that this is going to be done first class. And also, it's going to be done for a couple of needs that a few of the council members have spoke about already, but for workforce housing and, affordable housing, and also for the infill of the property. My entire life, of course, I've lived in Rapid City, and that's been a field out there, and you've seen changes on the field over the years, and unfortunately, change is hard in Rapid City. I know growing up, my grandparents were out off of Twilight Drive, and where they were at, there was nothing to 44. So, a lot of things have changed in Rapid City in the last, and I won't say how many years, but a few years. And, we have to sometimes embrace change because it's good for the community. And I think this is going to be one of those developments that's going to be good for the community, and I think it's going to be good for the neighborhood too. Because when you have new development in a neighborhood, it helps and this is my realtor hat talking, not my council member hat talking, but it improves your sale values of your homes. You know, you're going to see your property values go up as this new development goes in out there. And also, you will see them go up because you will have services that you didn't have before out there. So it's a difficult thing to swallow. You know, we all want our little piece of heaven and we never want it to change. But unfortunately, it does. And now going to the road, you know, I think that we are going to see something that's going to have to be done in the future, because until the city can have control of the road, I think I'm having a stroke tonight, sorry about that, total control of the road, you know, you put 3 lanes in down on that side, you're taking 36 foot to a 29-foot bridge, you're bottled up right there. When the city eventually has total control of the road from one end to the other, that gives us the opportunity to go in, replace the bridge, replace the entire road, and do it at one time in one project, which Mr. Chaffee, I'm sure, can tell you will save a lot of money doing it as one project. So anyway, thank you for what you're doing.
Thank you. And really one comment is, you know, my neighbors who are really, I tell you what, I know a lot of them, they've been really gracious enough to give us their input. But I want to alert you to one thing. You widen the road. If you think you have speeders today, you will have a lot worse speeders. You really need to tighten the road in certain areas to put some traffic calming devices to lower the speed on that road. No matter how much you post it, 20 or 25, people are going to do it as fast as the road can handle. Adding a 3rd lane will actually, in that low traffic road, as straight as it is going to increase the speed on that road, regardless of what you posted. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Darla Drew.
Thank you, Mayor. More of an observation than a question. We haven't required these kinds of improvements with other developments, as was shown in Mr. Shaffee's presentation. So I hesitate to put the onus, as Mr. Wright said, on Mr. Shaffee, and in this one instance. So I will be voting in favor of approval with stipulations. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. There's no motion on the floor. Amanda Scott.
Thank you, Mayor. Number 1, I'd like to make a motion to, let's see if I can get this, I always hate these appeals. I'd like to make a motion to authorize or approve the request from KTM Design Solutions for the exception to waive the requirements for the subdivision improvements.
Okay, second by John Robertson. Just so we understand, that would approve the appeal.
Correct.
We'd grant the appeal. We'd grant the appeal.
Grant the appeal.
Grant the appeal.
And
Okay.
may I hold
Yes,
the
you
floor
have
just
the floor.
a second? Thank you. I'm glad no one made the motion because in a side comment, the mayor had said I was the only one that hadn't spoke, so I thought I'd make the motion based on the discussion. Thank you.
Okay, back to Jerry Wright.
I'm sorry, I'm done. Thank you.
No? Back to Dale Tech.
I just want to make sure that this motion is correct. Mr. Shaffee has agreed to put sidewalks in. Part of this exception is to not do sidewalks, so as long as the council is going to agree with Mr. Shaffee about putting the sidewalks in, that should be removed from the approval of the exception request.
Thank you, Mayor. I do make that, thank you to Mr. Tech, and I am looking for the affirmation nod from Mr. Shaffee in the audience that we will go ahead and make that amendment that to remove the sidewalks so that the sidewalks will be put in.
And the street lighting.
Should have him come to the podium.
And the lights.
And the lights.
Okay. So then the motion is to approve the appeal and with the exception or the stipulation that sidewalks and lights be put in.
Yes.
Okay, and that's okay with the motion maker in the second? Okay. You need the floor, Jerry? Okay. All in favor of that motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no.
No.
Okay, the motion passes with 1 no from Mr. Laurenti. On to item 61.
Item number 61 is the infamous sidewalk discussion, and I will yield the floor.
Amanda Scott.
Thank you, Mayor. I would like to make a motion to acknowledge this discussion at this time and retain the floor if I can get a second.
Second by John Roberts.
Thank you. You know, I've been talking to a couple council members up here, and I had to actually go back and track the city council, legal and finance, public works, city council meetings as far as all of our discussions, because ever since we started this sidewalk discussion and these 5 projects, as we had requested staff to bring forward, they were bothering me. And I couldn't, for the life of me, I'm like, why is this bothering me? When I went back and reviewed the videos, it seems to me that we started this sidewalk or this discussion of ordering in sidewalks when we were talking about how many warps or waivers of right to protest that we were granting so that people did not have to put in sidewalks at the time that they were constructing their structure, whether it was residential or commercial. And so what was bothering me about this is that all of a sudden the discussion started going down the path of wear patterns and putting in sidewalks on vacant grounds that have a 1/4 of a mile or a 1/2 mile stretch. And I mean, what enters my mind then is if we make vacant ground people who own vacant ground, put in sidewalks, are we going to make them shovel the snow off of them as well? Are we going to make them maintain the grass? It just doesn't make sense to me. So I think our discussion has kind of gotten out of whack without getting, here we go again, clear definitions of what we're trying to accomplish here. So I like the discussion and I want to acknowledge it for now, but I think we need to go back to the drawing board and actually really take a look at when we talk about ordering in sidewalks on vacant property. I think it really needs to be those vacant lots where 95 or 90% of that sidewalk is already in for that vacant lot to have a sidewalk ordered in on. So I think we need to kind of regroup and maybe go back to staff because maybe the other council members have something else in mind. I know Alderman Nordstrom isn't here tonight, but I know he's the one that was really talking about the wear patterns and trying to get sidewalks in for people walking in them. But I had to go back and it was really bothering me because where I'm coming from is all those warps. I mean, I would just love it if everybody that had applied for a warp, and now if you've got a lot of other buildings in your area, just please put in your sidewalks, because that's what our discussion was if you had not put in a sidewalk at that time, and now you have other construction, please put in your sidewalk so the city doesn't have to come back and order you to put in your sidewalk that you had asked a waiver for. So thank you for letting me say that, because this whole discussion was bothering me, excuse me, and that was the reason, is that this discussion centered on when the city council was granting so many waivers not to put in their sidewalks at the time of construction. Thank you.
Steve Laurenti.
Thank you, Mayor. If I may, I'd like to ask Dale Tech a question on this, please.
Yes.
Mr. Tech, and I remember the conversation the same way, Alderwoman Scott. So my understanding was that the council wanted to see a lot of these areas where grants or warps were granted over the decades of the council, long before a lot of us were on this council, get some of these put in, because most of them, or a lot of areas, I should say, probably have that situation where we might have 1 or 2 vacant lots and the rest of it has been developed. Dale, my question to you is this something we, as we bring this back, can identify through Public Works? Is this going to be hard to identify, or is this going to be realistic to identify areas where we need to do this now?
It will take an extensive effort to research all areas and how much has been built and how much hasn't. As I stated early on in this conversation about sidewalks, the way our ordinance is written now is the way it should be. It's when you build something, you build your sidewalk. And that should be the end of discussion. Are there instances where it doesn't make sense? Yes, it does. However, in the past, I think for one reason or another, we were pretty eager to just not make anybody put in their sidewalk. So I agree with what Alderwoman Scott said about if you're building something, you better be prepared to put sidewalk in. That should be the standard.
All right, very good. I just wanted to make sure that we could do something moving forward to get this effort taken care of so that we can get these areas where the sidewalks need to be put in. So thank you. I yield.
Jerry Wright.
It's been a while since I've seen it, but I think we have a bicycle sidewalk plan, don't we? And I think that we do projects in the future, that should be a part of it. And I know I've had some development occur, and people would say, well, why am I putting a sidewalk here when I don't have anyone a mile either way that has it? So I think we need to come together as, not only when they build to put it in, but I think there needs to be an effort to build a continuity into the system, maybe, and get that done. And it's a tough one for council to order sidewalks in, but I think we need to do it in accordance to that plan. But bothers me is when we've had several of these come before us in my time, and someone wants to build, they're told they're going to build a sidewalk and it's $20,000 or whatever it was, and there isn't a sidewalk a mile either way. That just doesn't seem fair to me. So, good luck.
So the motion is to acknowledge the discussion, and it's not going to be picked up at a later date as far as we know today. Okay, all in favor of the motion to acknowledge, say aye. Aye. Opposed, say no. Motion carries. Now on to bids. Item number 62, approve award of total bid for WRF potable water improvements project opened on February 28th to the lowest responsible bidder, RCS Construction, in the amount of $585,048. Jerry Wright.
I make a motion to reject all bids and re-advertise.
Second.
Okay, I have a second by Lisa Modrick. And we'll go to Jason Solomon.
Well, I guess I was going to get out of the queue, but while I have it, I think this is a good chance for common sense to prevail. This is not a company who's trying to take advantage of the city or anything like that, and you can see how this clerical error could happen. So I think it's a good opportunity for us to show good faith. This particular company shows good faith, and I'm not comfortable with pulling a bond or anything like that. But I think it's a good opportunity for us to show that with a company that's been reputable for decades in our community, to get another shot at this with a more accurate figure. With that, I'll yield the floor. Thank you.
Charity Doyle.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, we certainly hope it's closer to accurate. This was a difficult project, so there is going to be some variance. But my biggest concern is that, this project only had 2 bidders, probably because of the complicated nature of it. But we see many projects come through that only have 1, 2, 3 bidders, and if we start pulling bonds, we're going to see fewer. And then they can ask whatever they want, which bottom line is going to hurt the taxpayer. So I can support this motion, definitely. Thank you.
Steve Laurenti.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to ask Mr. Tech a question on this particular agenda item, please.
Okay.
Mr. Tech, what is the cost going to be to re-advertise? Do we have a solid figure? Do we know what the cost actually is to?
We don't have a solid figure, but I'd estimate it's going to be somewhere between $2,000 and $7,000 to re-advertise and republish all the paperwork necessary to get the project out for bid.
Why? What causes the range to change so much?
I don't know the plans and specs intimately. I would assume that there's some updating that needs to be done, and you have to scrap all your old stuff. You have a set of plans that if you make one change in, none of the ones you've printed before are distributed for all the contractors, subcontractors, city staff. All the plan sets that are published have to be scrapped. So you've got to kind of start all over and get all that republished, as well as the front end documents.
So it's mostly staff time and salaries, that type of thing is the calculation.
Exactly, and publishing costs.
Okay. For me, I would love to see a compromise where we take that into account. I get that people make mistakes, no doubt about it. I don't believe that the cost should be passed on to the taxpayer, because staff is going to have to redo all of this. So I'd like to see a compromise I don't know if there's support for it, but I'd like to see a compromise that takes into account the cost to the taxpayers to have to redo this bid. That would be, and I would support that. I support the fact that we're going to work with the company that won this particular contract. I have no problem with that, but it's the cost to the taxpayer that I have a really big problem with in having to redo this. So I don't know if there's support there for that, but I would second it. I yield.
John Roberts.
Now my mic doesn't want to come on. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You know, that is unfortunate that there's going to be a minor, menial cost to the taxpayers, but that does happen quite often. We get bids in that we either don't accept or, we have to rebid, and it happens all the time. And that's kind of something that's built into the budget, I would imagine. But, there's a bigger picture than that to this, than a couple $1,000s of the taxpayers' money. And I think that Alderwoman Doyle hit the nail on the head on this one. If we decide we are going to start beating up our subcontractors for mistakes, everyone in the world makes mistakes. We all have made mistakes at one time or another. And if we hold them accountable and the state won't hold them accountable, what kind of a precedent are we setting within the city of Rapid City? If you read through everything that was sent to us from the different contractors and the letters that were sent in, there's people that have been in this business for 30 plus years that have never seen a bond pulled. And I don't want to be the one that's setting that precedent and making these people and companies, and especially the companies from out of state, think, wow, Rapid City is really tough to work with, And I hear that all the time anyway as a realtor when I talk to people from out of town. But I don't want to hear it any worse than it already is. So anyway, thank you very much.
Jerry Wright.
I'll speak against charging back to the contractor for a rebid, because we will be doing it all the time, because this isn't the only reject we've had. We have them countless times, and that would be just unfair. And I just consider it part of doing business. Thank you.
Okay, the motion on the floor is to reject all bids and re-advertise. Everyone in support of that motion say aye. Aye. Opposed say no. Motion carries. On to item 63, staff items. Authorize lowering the percentage of work that a contractor must perform with their own organization from 50% to 30% for the East Rapid City Water System Expansion, Morris Lane Pressure Reducing Valve Facility. Okay, motion to approve by Wright and a second by John Roberts. All in favor of that motion say aye. Aye. Opposed say no. Motion carries. Public hearing items, items 64 through 70. We'll open public hearing on those items, and sorry to keep you guys waiting so long, but we have a speaker request form from Jacob Cook. Oh, and item number 66.
Thank you for letting me talk about this. While I was deployed, my wife and I got divorced, and she was moving out of my house. And unfortunately, she crashed her motorcycle, passed away while I was overseas. And when I got back, I received a final notice of removal of some property from my property, and they were charging me like $300 for it. And I'd like to address that, because I had no control or knowledge of that situation from overseas. So I'd just like to see that relooked at. If there's a cost that needs to be covered, I'm more than willing to. But I just don't think it needs to be that high.
Okay.
And that's all.
Thank you. In just a couple minutes, we'll be taking that item up.
Okay, thank you.
And there was another gentleman here on item 67 who must have left. Okay, we'll close public hearing on those items, and we'll go to consent public hearing items, items 64 through 67. And we need to pull items 66 and 67. Does council want to pull any of the other items, or if not, can we have a motion? Okay, we have a motion from Jason Solomon to approve the consent public hearing items with the exception of 66 and 67, and that motion was seconded by Darla Drew. All in favor of that motion, say aye. Aye. Opposed, say no. Motion carries. So that'll take us to item 66. Approve resolution number 2017-012B, a resolution levying assessment for cleanup of miscellaneous property. Go to Jerry Wright.
Could you come back to this podium, sir? Thank you. You were deployed at the time from, I don't need to get into specifics, but I know I'm retired Army, and several of us are veterans, and most of us are aware of the Soldiers and Sailors Relief Act, which exempts you from any civil action, et cetera, in your absence while you're deployed. Did you know that?
I did not know that.
You do know it now. You do know it now.
Thank you.
So I would make a motion that this, his item be pulled off this sheet and re-looked at, because if he was deployed at the time of this action, he is legally protected. Thank you.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion. Second by Lisa Modry. That's good. Let's go to Tracy Davis.
There are two items that were paid that need to be removed from this special assessment roll. The one is Kuenhauser, and the other is Gadhamshetty.
Okay, duly
And
noted.
if you want to remove Mr. Cooks, you can add them. Okay.
Okay, let's clarify the motion. The motion is to remove Mr. Cook's item from this assessment roll.
Well, I didn't want to make a rash decision to just give him a break, but I would like to, because we've had this discussion before, and I know last time Mr. Gary Brown opened his wallet and offered to pay the bill, and before it was over with, it was taken care of, and I would do the very same thing, but I don't want to be paying for any more than I have to. So I would prefer that this be looked at. Pull the two that you want, and let's look at this other guy's deal and see what we can do.
We'll clarify the motion, please.
I'm not even making the motion, but I will, I guess.
Did you make the motion?
I can. I made a motion to, no, I didn't really make a motion. I made a statement to the fact that he's protected under the Soldiers and Sailors Act while he's deployed. That's what I said.
Okay, let's start over. Anyone want to make a motion on this item? Amanda Scott.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to make a motion to approve resolution of item number 66 with the removal of, if Tracy can help me out, number 2 and number 10 per the finance office, since they have already been paid. And then I'd also like to remove item number 12 for a city review before it comes back for payment on an assessment roll.
Okay, we have a motion.
Back to legal and finance.
Second it.
Okay, Jerry Wright seconds. John Roberts.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor. I just thought I would chime this in. If it's coming back to legal and finance, if we can have the city attorney look into that and, bring us some more research on that. Because, if you are correct, Jerry, which I believe you are, so then we might have to look at doing some changes towards our ordinance. So, anyway, thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, back to Jerry Wright.
To clarify, you should have a DD 214 or something that clarifies your deployment, correct? Or do you have it with you? Thank you. Bring a copy to the attorney. Thank you.
All right, all in favor of that motion?
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Motion carries. Item number 67, approve resolution 2017-014B, resolution levying assessment for the Countryside Water System Conversion Project. We'll go to Tracy Davis.
There are 4 that have been paid on this assessment. There are no numbers associated with these ones, so I will just say the last name: Carda, Schneider, Baird, and Bennett.
Okay, a motion by Scott and a second by Jason Solomon. All in favor of that motion, say aye. Aye. Opposed, say no. Motion carries. Okay, now onto the non-consent public hearing items, items 68 through 70. let's have Darla Drew read these in.
All right. Item 68, second reading, ordinance 6158, an ordinance amending section 17.06 of chapter 17 of the Rapid City Municipal Code, request by Spurlick Consulting, Inc. for Z0 Incorporated for rezoning from General Agricultural District to Low Density Residential District 2 for property generally described as being located northeast of Jolly Lane and Ping Drive intersection. Recommend approval.
Second by Jason Solomon. All in favor of approval, say aye. Aye. Opposed, say no. Motion carries. Next item, please.
Item 69, second reading, ordinance 6159, an ordinance amending section 17.06 of chapter 17 of the Rapid City Municipal Code, a request by Spurlick Consulting, Inc. for a benevolent and protective order of Elks for rezoning from low density residential district 2 to general agricultural district for property generally described as being located northeast of Jolly Lane, I don't think it's Jolly Land, and Ping Drive intersection. Recommendation approved.
Second by Steve Laurenti. All in favor of approval signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Motion carries. Next item.
Item 70, a request by Renner Associates, LLC for Presbyterian Retirement Village of Rapid City, Inc. for a vacation of right-of-way for property generally described as being located at 225 Texas Street. Recommendation to approve.
Second by Amanda Scott. All in favor of approval, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Motion carries. Item number 71 is the bill list. We'll go to Assistant Finance Officer Tracy Davis.
There are no additions to the bill list, so as presented to you, it's $4,548,503.69.
Motion to approve by Laurenti, second by Wright. All in favor of approval signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, say no. Motion carries. Anyone have a motion to adjourn?
Second.
Any motions or adjourning? Motion dies for lack of a... Okay, we'll motion to adjourn. Any objection? No. We're adjourned. Thank you, everyone.